What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Plant the Spear Podcast. I'm your host, Jesse. Welcome to the show. What a great show after an epic beatdown of Miami by Florida State. Florida State travels down and whips the Canes 45-3, 42-point victory. Just an excellent Saturday to be a Nole and get to watch Florida State embarrass their in-state rival on national television. You know, I would say they went down there and whipped them in their own place, but I don't think you can own a rental. So, just at least on their home turf in their own city, just went down there and embarrassed them. Miami had a lot of recruits on campus from what they said. So, they paid a bunch of kids to come watch Florida State. And, so we appreciate that. Kind of doing us some favors out there. But anyway, so, when you looked at, if you listened to the pregame episode, the preview that we did, you knew that this game had the potential to be a blowout. My prediction without Tyler Van Dyke was 38-10. When you looked at Miami and what they've done this season and their stats, they were not that great, and what was great was against a crappy schedule. So, again, the potential was there for there to be a blowout. I predicted a 28-point win if Van Dyke was not there. But even 45-3, doing, just the way they dominated, this even exceeded my expectations. Miami just looked inept on both sides of the ball. Florida State came out firing on all cylinders and just did whatever they wanted to. I like the game planning. I like the play calling. I like the execution. And in my opinion, this is one of the best games Florida State has played in all three phases. And they were just a superior program that night, and it definitely showed. And that was another thing. They did whatever they wanted against Miami. Miami wasn't really able to do anything. Once Tyler Van Dyke exited the game, which obviously, that had an impact on probably the final score, but it still would have been a blowout because they weren't doing anything while he was in there. He wasn't 100%. They shouldn't have even left. Honestly, I don't think he should have played in the first place. Sometimes, sometimes rival or not, you got to do what's best for the kid, and doesn't look like he should have been in the game to begin with, but Florida State just abused Miami. They out-physicaled them. They out-game planned them. Miami has absolutely nothing at backup quarterback, so any hope or prayer they had once Tyler Van Dyke left the game was gone in an instant. And so it was a nice victory for Florida State, nice victory for Mike Norvell and the whole program. It was a fun game to watch. Florida State had some big plays. You saw a bunch of big runs by Trey Benson, and then you had the opening touchdown to Pokey Wilson, a nice big pass play that was perfectly executed. And, Jordan Travis just dropped a dime in there. And so that was really nice to see. You had some big hits from Florida State. You had Jamie Robinson out here snatching souls and shaking quarterbacks, throwing them around like a pit bull. You had Jared Verse snapping the U over his knee. So it was pretty much everything you wanted as a Florida State fan in a game against Miami. You whooped their butt in their place, and you did it in a fun-to-watch, convincing manner. There was some quit in Miami, not going to lie. I mean, you saw a couple plays where there's some guys giving about half effort once they were down by 30 points. So, yeah, I mean, that's not exactly a good look for Miami. And they just got beat in all aspects. So, it was really fun to watch, and I really enjoyed it. You just couldn't have asked for a better game than that from Florida State. Like I said, I think it was probably their best game of the season. And, when you looked at Miami, like I said, you could have seen a path to where if Van Dyke played, they had a little crowd to begin with, not much, and they were making a little bit of noise. You thought, all right, well, Florida State could come out, be emotional, maybe press a little bit, and end up letting Miami hang around, and this turn out to be like a 31-24 type of game. But no, that was not the case. Florida State came out. They controlled their emotions. They were firing on all cylinders. They put their foot on Miami's throat, and they never took it off. And, and to be honest, they probably could have scored, like I said, they probably could have scored 60 points if they wanted to. They only passed the ball 16 times in the game. They were running it well, so they continued to do that. The starters were on the bench by the fourth quarter, so Mike was still aggressive, even with the backups. You're throwing on fourth down and some things like that. But, if they really wanted to press, it could have been a lot worse. But, given the whole grand picture, the grand scheme of things, you want to avoid those guys taking cheap shots, because you never know in a rivalry game if someone decides to take a cheap shot on one of your starters. You definitely don't want that. So I think it was smart to pull them. But that's another thing. It's nice to see Florida State finally be able to develop their depth and their talent on the second string by getting them in-game experience, which is something they've not been able to do for the past couple of years because they've had so many close games. And now you've had Duquesne and Boston College. You had Georgia Tech last week and now Miami this week, where those guys are getting some burn, and that's going to pay dividends going forward, especially in a rivalry game. I mean, I understand that, these two teams that they beat in the last 2 weeks were not great, but that's what you want to see Florida State do to that level of competition. And the thing is, now they're able to do that against other ACC teams. Sure, it's bottom feeder ACC teams, and that's Miami included. But when you look at what they've done over the last 2 weeks since coming out of the bye week, and you also look at how, they were on a 3-game losing streak. Things were kind of like, all right, are they going to come unraveled here or what? But then over the last 2 weeks, even though they've played some bad teams, they're still conference opponents. But you were able to beat them in a dominating fashion. And that's one thing that I put out on social media was in the last 2 games, Florida State has outgained their opponents by 710 combined yards. They put up 1,096 yards to 386 yards allowed in the last 2 games. That is ridiculous. And then you look at the point total as well. They've outscored teams by 67 points in the last 2 games with a combined score of 86-19. So that's just, it's absolutely dominating stuff. And again, I know it's kind of the lower level ACC teams, but still, you're beating conference opponents now by, 30 points at Boston College, 25 points to Georgia Tech, 42 points against Miami. These are the type of things that we want to see Florida State get back to being able to do. Now you've beat some mid-level teams, like you beat Louisville, and then now you have Syracuse coming up, which they're on a 3-game losing streak, but they started 6-0. So if you can get past them, then you're on track to doing the things you want to do. You just have to get better against that higher level of competition, which seeing what they've done the past 2 weeks, it still makes you mad about that NC State game because they still should have won that game. They still should be 7-2, but it was just a convincing win for Florida State. It was excellent. It was just an excellent game, and I think Mike was focused in this game. I laughed because I saw in the pregame someone had put out a picture where he was talking to Mario Cristobal, and Mike just had like this killer look in his eyes, like he was staring a hole right through Mario. And I actually zoomed in real close on Mike's eyes, and I tweeted out Noles by 40 because he just had that like shark with blood in the water type look. And it turned out to be exactly right. They won by 40-plus points. So, when this team's firing on all cylinders, when this team, when Norvell's in the zone and they control their emotions and they don't make the mistakes, this is a dangerous team. They are they can really cause some havoc. They can beat some good teams. And, they got back into the AP poll this week at number 25. Chances are they're going to be, ranked, if not close to being ranked, in the college football poll too. So, because if you put this team on a neutral field, playing the type of game they played against Miami, and I don't want to overhype it because, again, Miami sucks, and they should have won this game like they did. But I would take Florida State against pretty much anybody outside the top 10, even some in the top 10, to compete with them, if not win those games. They might drop a couple, but on any given Saturday on a neutral field, I like Florida State against pretty much anyone outside the top 10 and a few in the top 10. They are, they have to be playing good football, and there's still some pieces that they need. But once you see where they're at, like they've gotten a little healthy over the last couple of weeks. They've cleaned up some of the mistakes in this game that they didn't make last game. And when you see those things, FSU's ceiling is pretty high. Now, unfortunately, they've already lost 3 games this season. There's nothing you can do about that now, but they can still finish 5-0, which would give them 2 wins over your rivals, which would put you at 9-3, which would give you a chance to get a 10-win season with a bowl game. And you'd probably get a pretty respectable bowl game at 9-3, which is great for, where you're at in the climb. And sometimes I think the acronyms are a little cheesy, but, you went from 3 wins to 5 wins. Now you're already at 6, you're already bowl eligible. And you have a chance to end up with 9, if not 10 wins this season. And even if you were to drop one, I do think it would be a disappointment because I do think you should win every game on the rest of your schedule. But at the same time, even 8-4 with a bowl win to get you to 9-4 is still a very respectable season for this point in the rebuild, and I don't even know if I would call it a rebuild too much anymore. Now FSU still has some things that they need to work out as far as some more high end players and stuff, but you just look at what they've done the last 2 weeks, and now they're bowl eligible, and they just embarrassed a rival on national TV, and you got another rival at home the last game of the season that you feel good about in that game as well, and so it's just it gives you positive vibes, and that for the Noles, for the the fan base and recruiting, and this is going to pay dividends in recruiting because, like I said, Miami tweeted out they had a ton of recruits there to watch this game. And, they probably got a little excited because Miami had a little crowd to begin with. And then it pretty much looked like a regular Miami home game by halftime when half of them left. And even the fans that were remaining were kind of laughing at them in the fourth quarter when they fumbled the snap. It was just such a bad performance in front of whoever was there to watch it. And so by Miami. And that's what I think Mike Norvell knew. I think he saw an opportunity where Miami was reeling. They were not a good team. They're in year one under this new staff, and Mario, his strength is going to be recruiting with a strong NIL backing. And so I think Mike saw the opportunity to come in and embarrass them and just show everyone in the state who's watching, Florida State is here. We are back to being one of the three respectable teams in the state, and now you can also prove that against Florida. And while I think Florida is a better team than Miami, I think Florida State, if given the opportunity, they will come out firing on all cylinders and try and do the same thing against them. I don't think you'll beat Florida 45-3 necessarily, but if Mike can pile it on, I think he's going to do it. But again, it was a big win for this program and a big win for Florida State. And so now we'll just talk a little bit about the specifics of the game, not too much. So Florida State had 454 yards in the game. Again, I feel like if they wanted to press, they could have got more. They only allowed 188 yards to Miami, so they outgained them by 266 yards. So you outgained Miami by more yards than they had in the entire game. Yeesh, that is that's a beatdown. So Miami was only 4 of 13 on third downs, and of course, like I said, TVD being out of the game hurt their offense. But they just looked inept anyway. And like I said, we had talked about beforehand how it was, wasn't good with Tyler Van Dyke, and it was terrible without him. And that's basically exactly what we saw. So Miami only had 62 pass yards, 3.8 yards per carry rushing. So you got a good game out of your defense as well. FSU averaged 6.94 yards per play, held Miami to only 4.4 yards a play. And Florida State had 7 explosive plays. Miami only had 1. You had a 22% havoc rate to Miami's 12%. And so you feel good about what you did. And like I said, when I say this was one of the most complete games that I think Florida State has played in all aspects this year, they made a field goal, so that's good. They didn't allow Miami to have any big returns on special teams, which was something we said they were good at. So your special teams looked pretty good there too. They had 2 crucial which I guess it wasn't crucial because you were beating her, what. But you had 2 punts down to the 1, which was beautiful. So seeing things like that, special teams was great. And then even the areas, we know the offense was successful, and we know the defense was successful. But even in the areas where Florida State has struggled in the past, turnovers, red zone, and penalties, those are the 3 biggest areas that has killed the FSU offense this season. In the Miami game, Florida State won the turnover battle by forcing 4 turnovers. You had 2 picks, 2 fumbles, and one of them was Patrick Payton just smacking the ball out of the quarterback's hand. So that's a forced fumble. That wasn't luck. They were 6 of 6 in the red zone, and they only had 4 penalties. So they nailed basically everything. They even the areas that they've struggled, they came out and performed well, which was exciting to see. So like we talked about, Florida State was able to run the ball well. They put up over 200 yards of rushing for the 3rd consecutive game now. And, I mean, when you're able to run the ball like that, Florida State currently has, I actually have this written down right here. Florida State currently has the number 1 rushing offense in the ACC and is currently the 17th overall rushing offense in the country. So Florida State is running the ball extremely well. And that's considering they haven't had Trayshawn Ward in 2.5 games, who is technically, by stat wise, your best back. But man, Trey Benson is a dude. Like, he is a bowling ball who just runs so hard and is so fun to watch. I mean, he's just got, he's got so much power. And, when you watch him run, and then you bring in a guy like Toafili, who's got that kind of quick twitch, speedy threat. And then you also have C.J. Campbell had another touchdown in this game. And you really didn't even see Rodney Hill get to play a whole lot in this game. But you really have 5 good backs that you feel excellent about. And 3 of those guys are game changers. And one of them, who I think Rodney Hill is going to be one of your most talented backs in a while, and he's only a freshman. So, again, the run game is there. The offensive line has been doing great the last 3 games. They got some continuity, which is something that's been good to see. You still lack some pieces there, and that, I think that's what's exciting too. Is like, your offensive tackle with the highest ceiling is still on the bench, and that's Julian Armella, because he's not ready yet. You have a blue chip offensive tackle in Lucas Simmons who's committed but not even on the team yet. So, when you see what they've been able to do, and that they have more talented guys coming down the pike, then you feel pretty good about where this team can go. They only threw the ball 16 times, like we mentioned, but they were efficient in their passing. So Florida State on the night went 13 of 16 passing for 225 yards, 3 touchdowns, and a pick. And so you had a completion percentage of 81.3%. Jordan Travis on the night was 10 of 12, 202 yards, 3 touchdowns, a pick, with a completion percentage of 83.3%. So very efficient in passing. They didn't have to throw the ball a lot. They threw it when needed, and they were effective doing it. Like I said, if they really wanted to throw it more, I feel like they could have done that, but they didn't have to, because they were running the ball so successfully. So again, like I said, you just look at the dominant performance that Florida State has had in the last 2 weeks, and you look for that to carry forward, because this is, again, I know there are 2 pretty bad teams, including Miami, but when you get the chance to embarrass somebody like that, you have to take it, and that's exactly what Florida State did. And I think the cool thing about Mike Norvell, and something that I appreciate from Mike Norvell, is that he does not just give the typical answer that most coaches give of, oh, this is just another game and things like that. It's a faceless opponent, which they do every other game, except for 2. He acknowledges that this in Florida are more important to this fan base, to this program, than any other game on the schedule. Now, they're all important. Of course they're important. But he acknowledges what this rivalry means to the school and to the fan base. And he knows that, like he said in his press conference, they do things to prepare for these year-round. And that's something that it looked like they had been preparing for extra, because, they just blew Miami, run them out of the stadium. And so, I appreciate that from Mike Norvell, to know that when you have an opportunity to put a beating on Miami like this, you go out and you do it. And so I don't think he held back any. Like I said, I think they probably could have stayed on the gas a little more, but they didn't have to. A 42-point win, largest margin of victory on the road, especially by Florida State. So, again, just coming from 52-10 in 2020, Norvell's at home watching the game because he can't be there because of COVID, to just an utter disaster, to last year. You get a thrilling victory at home in a game that Florida State should not have won on paper, to then this year a 42-point victory in Miami on the road. That's progress. And then you also look at, you get them at home next year, you get them in Tallahassee, and in my opinion, there's some massive changes, because Miami can talk all they want about got to get the right guys and the right fit and everything, and I understand that, because that's something that's happened with Florida State, but there's enough talent on that roster. They should not be this bad. And so unless they go heavy in the portal to plug some holes, or they make some coaching changes, I don't see it getting a lot better for Miami. And so you have a real opportunity here to make it 3 in a row next year and beat them at home in Tallahassee. So, you feel good about getting this victory and where it stands in the rivalry. Now gets you bowl eligible, like we talked about. And you've already bested last season's win total with 3 games still to go that you feel good about. So, just to kind of sum that up, man, it was an awesome Saturday. Kids, cover your ears. It was an epic ass beating by Florida State, something that I just know all Seminole fans across the country, across the world, wherever you're at watching that game, you were smiling from ear to ear because this is something that we just could not have. This was Christmas come early, and because it's always fun to beat on Miami. You probably, especially with the way things went preseason, you had Miami top 15 preseason. Mario Cristobal was already ranked as one of the top ACC coaches, hadn't even coached a game yet. Tyler Van Dyke was on the top list of all the quarterback graphics and stuff that come out. And then for Florida State to just beat them like they did, it's just kind of retribution for everything leading up to it. As much trash as their fans talked preseason. Oh, you guys, thank you for beating us last year because we have an elite staff now and it's not going to be the same. We'll still be favored at home despite some struggles. And no, man, none of that has come true. You got outcoached, outplayed in your own building. So that was just awesome to see. Florida State probably winning by 42 points just sent all 10 other fans back into hiding until preseason of next year when they can come out and be preseason champs again. So until next year, Miami fans, it's been fun. We'll see you next year. So that was just awesome to see, man. It was a great Saturday. Just Florida State put a thorough whipping on Miami, and like I said, it's just it means more when it's Miami. But at the same time, and this is something that I also feel this team is aware of too, Miami's not our Super Bowl. I feel like this was Miami's Super Bowl. This was their national championship. If they could have knocked off Florida State, that would have been the highlight of their season. For Florida State, it's the opposite side of the coin. Like, you want to beat Miami, but you have bigger goals. You still want to finish the season 5-0. You still want to have the possibility of a 10-win season on the table. You want to get to that bowl game. So as far as like a hangover next week from a big rivalry game, yeah, okay, it is a concern because you are going on the road to kind of a sleepy environment in Syracuse. But I feel like the team knows they should have won this game. They expected to win the game, probably in a convincing fashion, and they're gonna enjoy it for 24 hours, like Norvell said. Hey, we're gonna celebrate this thing until we get back to Tallahassee, but then we have to bury it and get back to work. Because if you come back next week and have a letdown against a reeling Syracuse team, it's going to be a bad look. But I don't think that's going to be the case. And just a couple things that I want to talk about too, just kind of what happened over the weekend. Obviously, Florida State got, that win against LSU is looking awesome right now. They beat Alabama in overtime, which if you listened a couple episodes ago, I had mentioned LSU at home in Death Valley at night, coming off a bye week against a Bama team that doesn't look great. Watch out. Now, it could happen. And I didn't think it was going to happen once Bama, kept coming back. But they pulled it off. And so that win looks great now. I mean, you have a win against a team that's going to be, I thought the number 10 ranking was kind of fluff, for LSU last week in the playoff rankings. Now they're going to be deep in the top 10. So, you have a win against a ranked top 10 ranked LSU team, which looks good for Florida State. That game's probably going to be a heck of a lot tougher in Orlando next year than it was this year. But that's still looking like a great win for Florida State. Then some other games from this weekend. Clemson lost to Notre Dame. LOL. Suck it, Dabo. I'm sorry, but the funny thing about this is like, we're not the SEC. We don't cheer for the conference. I'm never going to be like cheer for a team because they're ACC. There's no way in hell I'm ever going to cheer for Miami to beat anybody. And so to me, Clemson is kind of like they're a rival to me. I know a lot of people don't consider them a rival, but just they're more of like a conference, interdivision, which won't be the case next year. But they're a rival based on what you play for and how you're the two powers in the conference that are battling back and forth. Like Georgia and Alabama, like they're not direct rivals, but they're the two powers that have to battle back and forth. So, that's kind of where we're at with Clemson, and despite the down years, of course we're still a power in the ACC, and I feel like they'll be back there soon. But just to see them lose, especially convincingly, I mean they got smoked by Notre Dame. I really wish we could have seen this version of the Clemson team, even the one we saw against Syracuse, where DJ got benched. It happened again this week. Man, where was that in Tallahassee? Like, of course we got the Clemson team that looked really good that night, but hey, it is what it is. Water under the bridge now, but every kind of cut on Clemson. Every little loss, the coordinators being gone and leaving, every little thing that's going to balance the powers back out, I'll take it. And so them losing on the road big time to Notre Dame was good to see. Because, like I said, you're competing against these guys year in and year out. You're recruiting against them, and so you need that balance of power to fall back your way. And every little thing helps. You're out here beating your rival by 42 points. They're getting embarrassed by Notre Dame. NC State, they beat Wake this weekend. They have seemed to find something in a freshman quarterback, MJ Morris. That's not exactly great to see, but I still wish you'd have beat that team in Raleigh. That's the one that's going to be kind of the thorn under my side the whole offseason, just knowing how close you were to having that top 25 win, to being 7-2. You would have already been ranked, but again, it is what it is. It's water under the bridge. Can't cry over spilled milk now, but so they beat Wake, and the funny thing about Wake losing, to me, it was pretty satisfying because Wake has been so arrogant the last couple of weeks. It seems like even Clawson's made some comments. There's a guy on Twitter who's like a beat writer. Maybe for Wake Forest, who took some shots at Florida State after they won and just been like, how disrespected Sam Hartman is and how good Wake Forest is and people need to respect them. Now you drop 2 games in a row and you're probably back to irrelevancy. So it was nice to see Wake get humbled a little bit more than anything. Of course, this doesn't help your strength of schedule with Clemson losing and Wake losing, but, again, who cares, man? Screw them other teams. Like, we're only pulling them for Florida State here. Then you got Florida, went and played at Texas A&M. They did win. I think it was still like something like 41-24-ish, something like that. But it still wasn't a very impressive win. It was pretty tight to start with. First off, A&M sucks. And, and they beat Miami. So that tells you how bad Miami is. But, like, A&M is not good. And they had 19 players out with flu. So the fact that Florida didn't go in there and just handle them is, again, it doesn't look great for Florida. Of course, again, you get a 41, 42-24, whatever it was, win on the road. That's not terrible, but yeah, I mean, that was expected when you got I think Texas A&M is like 3-6 now and had 19 players out. So, it's not exactly a great look. Then when you look at your opponent coming up, and we're going to do a preview on them coming up this week. But Syracuse is now on a 3-game losing streak after falling to Pitt. I believe it was 19-9. Garrett Schrader is currently out at quarterback. And without Garrett Schrader, they have no offense. They literally have one guy that they're relying on their production for, and that's Sean Tucker. And if you can bottle him up, it's game over. Now, will Schrader be back? I don't know. They said that he was, from the injury report that I read, they said that he was available for the Notre Dame game, but came in, did not look good, had to be pulled, and then he did not play in this game. So even if he's back, he may not be 100%, which isn't good for a run-first quarterback. They said that he normally runs the ball a lot, and in Notre Dame he only ran it 2 times. So that may be, even if he's back, it may not be all bad news for FSU there. But Pitt did outgain them by almost 200 yards. And so, Cuse has lost some people over the season. They lost their best cornerback to an ACL injury. They started 6-0, but it was kind of like Miami. Even though Miami didn't win the games, Syracuse did, but they didn't play anybody. They played a watered-down schedule, and even then they got lucky against NC State that they didn't have Devin Leary, and they hadn't figured out who MJ Morris was yet, so they kind of got a freebie win there. And again, they won the games, so you got to give them credit for that because Miami, they're over here losing to Middle Tennessee State and Duke. So they won the games against the bad teams, but they didn't really do it in convincing fashion. I think the first 2 games were like 2-point wins or overtime wins. So now that they played a couple of decent teams, they've dropped 3 in a row, and without their quarterback, they don't look like they can do anything on offense. Now, they don't have a bad defense, but again, like I said, you just feel better about winning that game on the road now, seeing the way Florida State has played the last 2 games, seeing the way Syracuse is kind of playing right now. Like I said, Florida State was in this game, in the Miami game, was probably the most healthy they've been since LSU. And seeing that they came out focused and they didn't make a whole lot of mistakes, if they can play another game like that next week, then again, you feel pretty good about things. And, man, getting to a 10-win season would be huge for this staff, for this program. But like I said, you got to take it one game at a time. You got a Louisiana team that's not doing very good, as they're a shell of themselves from last year, coming to your place. You get Florida at home on a Friday night. I don't know how crazy it'll be, on Black Friday right after Thanksgiving, but it's a guaranteed night game, so it's probably going to be pretty packed in Doak. You get home field advantage, and I think you're the better team there. So you just feel good about it, but it's one game at a time. But you are back in a bowl game, which is excellent. So happy to finally end that streak. And so you just got to go out and finish strong. But I feel good about this team doing it, especially the way they're playing. I mean, they really are. They seem like they're firing on all cylinders right now, and they're I know the competition wasn't great the last 2 weeks, but when you're outgaining teams by 700 yards in 2 games and 67 points, you feel good about the way this team is playing. And so the last thing I want to do before we round this episode out is just talk about some of the progress that Florida State has made, like you heard me mention earlier in the episode. So Florida State now has a top 20 offense and defense. And so they're 15th in total offense, second in the conference, 17th in total defense, second in the conference. But they are also first in the ACC in rushing offense, third down offense, sacks allowed. They are first in pass yards per completion. They're first in pass defense. And so, man, you can just see the progress that this team has had. And that leads me to one thing that I did before the season started. And I know I talked about this in an episode, and I believe I published an article on it and everything. But one thing that I talked about preseason was about the progress or the progress that I thought FSU could make and projecting where they could be. And the way I did that was when I went back and I looked at Mike Norvell's career as a play caller, either sole offensive coordinator or head coach, where it was his offense, he was in charge, and how he performed versus how he's performing at Florida State. And who's more to blame for 2020 and I don't even really count 2020, because you can't install things over Zoom. You can't build strength and conditioning when you're having to send kids to work out at home. They're not on your nutrition plan. You can't practice. You can't recruit in person. So, and you didn't even play a full season of games. So I started with 2021, and but who was more to blame for the bad season in 2021? Was it Florida State and the team that Mike Norvell inherited, or was it Mike Norvell just forgot how to call offense when he got to Tallahassee? And so what I did was I looked at his career averages over the 8 seasons that he has been a sole offensive coordinator or head coach. And when I looked at that, I said, okay, well, what do I believe more? Do I believe in 8 years of data as an offensive play caller and production numbers? Or do I believe more in a disjointed COVID season and 2021 when he hasn't even really had a chance to build his roster yet? So to me, I'm leaning more towards believing the 8 years. And so when you look at some of the stats, and this was something that when I looked it up today, of course I had to use projections because there's still 3 games left in the regular season, and there is a 4th game now with the bowl game, which was something Norvell, they had a bowl game during his career averages too. So I had to project, and what I did was I used season averages, how many yards per game and stuff like that they're averaging right now, and I just tacked it on if they did the same things for the next 4 games. And the numbers line are almost is surprising. And I never preach on this podcast. It's about me being right. But when I looked at these numbers, man, I was spot on with this projection and this prediction. And I just didn't expect it to maybe happen this fast. So one thing that I said was, when Norvell gets the pieces in here to be able to run his offense, because it didn't look like it did at Memphis in 2021. He could run the ball. That was his strength, mostly because he couldn't pass it. And so they did what they had to find success. But again, when you look at now, they've added players on the offensive line. They've transformed the receiver room. They've added players at running back. You have a full-time starter at quarterback who's not splitting reps anymore. And you can see the improvement. So let me read you these numbers, because it's almost mind-blowing how close this works out. So Mike Norvell's career average prior to FSU, 2021 FSU and 2022 FSU, that's who we're talking about here. So 2021 FSU. I'll read these first because these are these. Let me start. Let me start with his career averages actually. So passing over his career, Mike Norvell's teams have averaged 466 passing attempts, a 62.7 completion percentage, 3,804 yards, 32 touchdowns, 10 interceptions in the season. 2021 FSU, Florida State threw the ball 340 times, so 120 less attempts, 61.5% completion percentage, 2,400 yards, 1,400 less than his career averages, 20 touchdowns, that's 12 less, and 12 interceptions, that's 2 more. So you had less touchdowns, less yards, and more interceptions. So now fast forward to 2022, using those projections, Florida State is on pace to finish with 397 pass attempts, a 62.3% completion percentage, 3,529 yards, which is only about 200, so a little over 200 yards off of his career average, 27 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions. I mean, the numbers are right there. So this is the potential that I talked about that I saw in the offense. That's there. You just have to give them the pieces and the time to get things rolling. When we flip over to the rushing offense, so his career averages, he averaged 545 rushes in a season over his career. This is pre-FSU, remember that. 2,629 yards, 4.82 yards per carry, and 30 touchdowns. 2021 FSU, 446 carries, 100 less, and they had 2,134 yards, so about 500 less, 4.78 yards per attempt, and 21 touchdowns. Like we said, they ran the ball pretty well in 2021. Now, 2022, using the projections again, they are on pace to have 500 rushing attempts, 2,753 yards, which is more than the career average, 5.51 yards per carry, which is more than the career average, and 29 touchdowns, which is only 1 touchdown off from the career average. Again, we know these numbers can change. They could be more, they could be less. These are just projections, but this is based off 9 games of production so far. And they've already faced 5 top 50 defenses. They have 2 left. One is Louisiana, so that's probably top 50 against lesser competition, and the other is Syracuse. So it's not like they have another elite defense that they're going to face either, where they're going to get shut down on offense. As far as their total production, total yards, total offense, so his career average is 6,433 yards per season. That's their season average over eight years with Mike Norvell. 62 touchdowns in the season. In 2021, FSU only had 4,553 yards and 41 touchdowns. So you had a 2,000-yard drop-off and a 20-touchdown drop-off in your offensive production compared to his career average, what he was capable of. So now, using the projections again in 2022, Florida State is on pace to average 6,282 yards and 56 touchdowns. Right there in line, less than 200 yards under what his career average would be. So again, when you look at, like I said, when you look at where he came from and you knew what they were capable of, this level of production is not surprising. And keep in mind, like we talked about, you could still add a lot higher end pieces to this offense. You have a lot of talented young offensive linemen that are still not ready to play yet. You have Hakeem Williams, who's still only committed. So if they can do more work in the portal and get more high-end guys here, this offense could really take off. And it's already one of the best offenses in the country now. And so just to show that progress, coming from 2021 to 2022, this is just FSU. So passing offense last season was 94th overall, 9th in the ACC. This year it's 33rd overall, 3rd in the ACC. Rushing offense, 52nd last year, 6th in the conference. 17th this year, 1st in the conference. Total offense, 80th last year, 9th in the conference. 15th this year, 2nd in the conference. Third down offense, 105th last year, 13th in the conference. 12th in the nation this year, 1st in the ACC. Pass efficiency, 75th and 8th. 22nd and 3rd. Now, this is where you can really see Alex Atkins working here. So kudos to Alex and the offensive line and the guys up front working their tails off. Sacks allowed in 2021, this team was 114th in the country, 12th in the ACC. This year, they're 33rd in the country and 1st in the ACC in sacks allowed. So again, you can see where the progress is coming. And as far as some other rankings for Florida State, just 2022, they're 13th in total EPA, 15th in EPA per play, 24th in success rate, 10th in yards per play, 9th in yards per completion. So you can see, like, the only area that they're really struggling is red zone, which is 92nd, which is surprising because they were good at that last year. But again, like I said, when you look at all these numbers and the trends where they're headed, and they're headed back to where his career averages has been, this is what you expect from Norvell's offense, not last year. So I think people were focusing too much on one and a disjointed year of data versus what he's proven his offenses can do. So, again, now that you have a top 20, a top 15 offense, Florida State just has to clean up some of the play, clean up some of the mistakes, get a few more pieces in here, and they have a high ceiling. If they can get to 9 or 10 wins this year, that's probably a little. I predicted 8-4, possibly with a ceiling of 10-2. Not counting a bowl game. So, that is the trajectory that you want to see. And once you get to there, the recruiting will start to follow. I know the staff has had a few shortcomings in recruiting. There may be some things to evaluate as far as getting some more recruiters on the staff. But, just seeing the trend, seeing you beat the brakes off the lower-level ACC teams, seeing you beat those mid-level ACC teams, and then seeing you compete with the upper-echelon ACC teams during a rebuild, coming off a 5-win season, man, you can see it's there. They just need to continue improving as a staff, as a team, and continue recruiting. But it starts with games like this. It starts with 42-point win over your rival. It starts with capitalizing on this and then moving on and beating Syracuse and finishing the season strong. So, again, I just wanted to point that out because when I started adding up those numbers, I was like, man, this is crazy. Like, I wanted to mention that on the show. So that's pretty much going to wrap it up here, guys. Just, it's all good vibes this week, but it all depends on what they can do on Saturday. Can they back this up? Can they continue the momentum and go up and beat Syracuse? Because this was just a great Saturday where you got to absolutely pants your rival on national TV, and man, it just felt good. So, like I said, they got to keep winning. They got to keep playing well. Don't let the emotions, carry over. But they deserve to celebrate. This team deserves every bit of success they get after what they've been through. They put in the work. They earn the success. And so I'm just happy to see, the things come out of the locker room with the cigar smoking and the breaking the rock and just everybody having a good time. And it's just, they deserve it for all the work that they've done, and it's nice to be able to see them have that. It's nice to see them taste success and know how that feels, and have a team that knows how to win close games now. You have a team that knows how to keep their foot on somebody's throat. You just need to see it consistently from week to week, because that's really been the only thing. It's just been a little inconsistent. But overall, I think we're seeing a much improved brand of football out of Florida State now. And like I said, you're probably going to crack the playoff top 25. And, if you win 10 games and you don't lose another game this season and you're already at 25 now, you could definitely see Florida State finishing easily top 20, maybe even top 15. So, but, we're not going to get ahead of ourselves yet. You got a decent Syracuse team. Again, it depends on if Schrader's playing or not coming up this week. And so I look forward to that. We'll be back with a preview. And right now, man, I'm soaking up this Miami win because, gosh, it felt good. Just to absolutely embarrass your rival, one of the most heavily trash-talking fan bases that you can find out there. Which, this is typical Miami. They trash-talk preseason. They're great in the preseason, and then once they start sucking, which they always do, then it's back to the woodwork, and we'll see them next year. So, just an excellent Saturday for Florida State. They beat the crap out of their rival. Dabo lost. Your best win beat Alabama, so it looks even better. And so, just all around a nice Saturday and a great win for Florida State. They are 6-3 and bowl eligible now. And we'll be back with you guys later this week for a preview of the Syracuse game. So you guys have a great week. We'll be back with you later. And thank you for listening. Thank you for all your support. And go Noles.